take my land away. Do you have a standard for what's right, or are you only following the mob? Romans 13 says you're a minister of God. Is that how you see the job? Who you really are, we'll know by what you do. We saw you swear an oath. Now please follow through. More than ever now, Mr. Sheriff, sir, we need you to be true. Will you be who we voted for when we voted for you? Are you prepared to stand in the gap? Are you prepared to interpose? We the people are looking up to you. You're the man we chose. God gave the rule for civil ministry in Exodus 18, 21, 22, 23. More than ever now, Mr. Sheriff, sir, we need you to be true. Will you be who we voted for when we voted for you? Yeah, we voted for you. Now we need you to be true. So just who are you? Who are you? There's a battle going on, a war for your soul. It's a devil's deal, it's mind control. They want you to believe that you have no hope. They're counting on the fact that you are a dope. Well, they tell you the rules, tell you what to heed. They know that you won't question, they know that you don't read. We've lived a lie for way too long. It's time to know right from wrong. No matter what they told you all, courts and judges cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw because courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw because courts cannot make law. Congress makes the laws and the courts make none. That's in the Constitution, it's in Article 1. Look it up, read the words, use your own two eyes. Know it well, mark the spot, have it memorized. Tell your children, tell your mama, tell your family. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors if you wanna be free. You won't learn the truth in government schools. It's up to you to know the rules. No matter what they told you all, courts and judges cannot make law. The case law method has a fatal flaw because courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law. Courts cannot make law.
During a recent Anne Arundel County Council meeting in Maryland, Councilman Michael Perutka was the lead sponsor of Resolution 47-15 that gives notice to charities that it is the intent of the council to phase out funding for nonprofit organizations. The councilman pointed out that charitable giving is not a lawful function of the county council. The resolution passed.
For a comment, this really is born out of a desire to follow the law and follow the proper duty and role of civil government. It really is not born out of any issue with any of these particular charities, and it's not really a question about whether or not the work or the activity of the charity is meaningful or even essential. It's really a question of propriety and whether or not there's the authority for us to give charity. We don't have any money at the county level here that we don't get by taxing somebody. So what we're doing is taxing people and offering that money into charities. Just as an example, I have received a letter from a constituent that said, "I'm from your district. I'm starting to wonder what authority government, in this case Anne Arundel County, has in making grants to charities / nonprofits." I thought giving to charities, nonprofits was a citizen's decision to make. And so what the intent of this is really to return that charitable decision to the citizenry. Thank you.
Mr. Smith is completely right. I got a big heart. And I think the Community Action Agency would know that. So you send me a letter and I'll send you $2,000, okay? So you see how I did that, and that's what I'm just asking the people of Anne Arundel County, is that the government should make the decision for your money. You should reach into your heart and give to people like you folks, the Sarah House, and whatever the case may be. I just, I got a problem because not everybody's going to give $2,000 like me to the folks I will, okay? But that's their choice. They got to live with God and what they do with their money. It's not my choice to turn around and tell them who they want to give to. If they want to give to Sarah's house, fine. Give it to Sarah's house. Give it to whoever they want. If they don't want to give nothing, that's their choice. I just got a real problem with taking somebody's money and saying, you're going to give. And then what we do is we cover it with government and say it's government's responsibility because, we spent $1 million and we're going to get $4 million in return. I just have a philosophical problem with it. I think a person should give within themselves.
I've never been to anything like this. It's my first time. My buddy Josh took me. Incredibly enlightening. I got a ton out of learning about the Constitution and things that I never knew were even written in it or how they were written. It was fabulous how you explained how God and Jesus have been written into the Constitution. And I forget what you said about the separation of church and state, but it was really the part that got me where you said that it was set up to keep the state out of the church, I think. Anyway, it was fabulous. You did a great job.
I think nowadays God is incorporated into our public school systems and our society as a whole, and so I think that this group and incorporated into my school and hopefully in other schools around here will help bring God to the forefront and show that God is the main part of our Constitution, and then that's what needs to be shown within our society.
The Environmental Protection Agency is not an enumerated power found in the Constitution. The power wielded by the EPA towards state and local governments is disproportionate to any authority granted by the Constitution. Therefore, it is incumbent upon elected officials to remind the public of the Environmental Protection Agency's unconstitutional behavior in the public square. Councilman Michael Perutka addresses this issue in an exchange with a fellow councilman who also sits on the Anne Arundel County Council in Maryland.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I worry about with, and by the way, I didn't say the EPA didn't exist. I said it didn't exist legally. There's a difference. And I would challenge, if anybody can show me in Article 1, Section 8, where the federal government has the authority to engage in environmental work, please show it to me. I'll be happy.
If you can show me a Supreme Court decision that says it doesn't exist.
Well, your question indicates that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of what the Constitution says. So it's the question of whether the court's above the Constitution or the Constitution's above the courts.
I thought the class was great because it did give me hope. And what I was looking for is inspiration, godly inspiration and direction and instruction on how to spread this hope to others. Yeah. And
I think it was fantastic
educate.
because we were reminded that our rights are founded on the Word of God.
Yes.
And that's a message of hope, faith, and love that the world needs to hear, and Mass did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Today I had the chance to listen to a great speech about the real meaning of the Constitution. I believe after listening to this presentation, I can say that I even feeling more in love about the Constitution and how we should be knowing more about it every day. I think this is a great presentation that wakes up everybody's thoughts and values and morals back again. I recommend that you hear and listen to this presentation, take the course, because it will wake you up and the truth will always reveal itself.
Declaration of Independence. Cameras rolling. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's exactly right. What happens if I try to steal her property? Government does what?
Stops you.
Why?
Because you're going on because it's her property.
Because it's her property.
It's her pursuit of
And what's the job of government?
to keep our God-given rights.
To secure. Say secure. Everybody.
Secure.
Our God-given rights. Our God-given right to property, as an example. Okay. You gonna stop me? Okay. What's up now?
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for being here. I don't know how it is all across the country, but we're starting to have a little cold snap here again in Maryland. But I want to thank all of you that are here present tonight and all of you that are online across the country. I want to say that tonight, I believe, I'm correct, that this is the most online audience we've ever had at Institute on the Constitution. There are people watching from Ohio and Maine and California, and I want to thank the people, by the way, in California for adjusting to our time, our time zone. So I guess you're used to doing that in California. This is a very important and timely topic that we're going to be discussing tonight, the importance of our president, our chief executive officer of our country, to be a natural-born citizen. And what a natural-born citizen is, of course, has become the subject of some debate, and who is a natural-born citizen has become the subject of some debate. And so it's a very important, as I say, and timely topic. And I have a very important disclaimer to make as well, and that is part of our presentation this evening is going to be a video that was a presentation presented by Dr. Herb Titus back in 2010, actually in this very room. The room was set up a little differently at that time, but Dr. Titus gave a presentation about what a natural-born citizen is and the importance of our president being a natural-born citizen. And I want to make sure that I make this disclaimer that no opinion regarding anyone who is presently running for president is being expressed tonight by Dr. Herb Titus. Dr. Herb Titus made this presentation in 2010, and it's an excellent presentation, and we're going to use that as the first part of our presentation tonight and learn from it, and then David is going to tell you about the rest of how we plan to proceed. But we plan to take this whole subject of natural-born citizen apart and look at it and put it back together. Okay, so we're going to delve into it. But I want you to know that Dr. Titus has asked us to make sure that we clearly make the disclaimer that he is not, by means of this presentation, making any opinion or delivering any opinion about the current people running for president, because, of course, back in 2010, we didn't know who those people were. So now, as the program goes on and the presentation continues, we and you in the audience here probably will express some opinions about who might be qualified. That's okay, as long as you understand that none of those opinions that are kicked around here tonight are reflect the opinion of Dr. Titus, okay? Speaking of Dr. Titus, the DVD that you're going to see tonight, the presentation, we have for sale for a measly bargain price of $5 tonight. So you could, if you're impressed by what you see, and I think you will be, you might want to grab a copy or a couple copies of that to share to watch again for your own edification, or maybe, of course, to share with others. By means of announcement, let me say that this is the first time you've been here at Institute on the Constitution, just if there's any kind of emergency here and we have to leave, if you leave this door, you can go by either way in the hallway. You can go right or left, and you'll find an exit. Also, if you need to use a restroom facility, there's a key near the door there, and it says men's and women's, and you can take that right down the hall to the left, okay? If you don't know your way, ask somebody. Also, by way of announcements, next First Friday, which I believe is March 4th, we will have Mr. Eric Boucher, a very interesting presentation. He has brought a case regarding the gerrymandering, the redistricting, I'm going to call it gerrymandering, that occurred here in Maryland in 2011 based on the 2010 census. His story about how he has brought a case and gotten it heard, his success is an American success story. He is greatly to be commended. He's a very humble man, and he gives a great presentation. He will tell you the story of how he is almost single-handedly, now some others have come to his aid, but single-handedly he has brought this and gotten this before the courts. So he's done a fantastic job, and we want to help give him not only commendation but also help. So he's going to be here March 4th, and I highly recommend. And even you across the country, this has to do with the Maryland case of redistricting, but this happens everywhere. This is a very important subject matter for us all to learn about. I want to remind you, you saw as we were warming up here and getting ready, some things from our website. Please go to our website, theamericanview.com, and see all the things that are happening across the country. I'm greatly encouraged, just like I'm encouraged that there are a lot of people watching online across the country tonight. I'm encouraged at all the work that Jake McCauley and Massey Campos, and this week, next week, Pastor David Whitney is going to go out to Bend, Oregon, and speak to the people out there where the tragedy, that murder of a man out there in Oregon occurred, and David's going to go out there and speak out there. So there's work happening all over the country with the Institute on the Constitution. Please go to the website, The American View, and learn about it. And if the Lord moves you, if the Spirit moves you to help us in that work, please, we would be grateful if you would do so. So, as we begin tonight, let me just quote very quickly from Deuteronomy 17. We're talking about the chief executive of the country. In Deuteronomy 17, that we might find some biblical basis for who is a natural-born citizen. and because this has to do with the principles of that governs kings. It begins in chapter 14, in verse 14. When you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you and possess in it and dwell in it and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you shall surely set a king over you whom the Lord your God chooses, one from among you, from among your brethren, you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. So as we begin talking about this tonight, let's maybe begin with that biblical idea that if we're going to set someone above us as our ruler, the Lord is telling us, do not set a foreigner over you. You need to set one who is chosen from among you and is your brother. With that, let me introduce Pastor David Whitney, who's going to conduct our presentation this evening and introduce the video by Dr. Herb Titus from Rutgers University. Pastor David Whitney.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me.
I just need to mention one additional announcement that Michael didn't have. Mark, we just had, as you know, a murder take place in Oregon, and we want a response here in Maryland. And we're going to have a candlelight vigil tomorrow night in Towson. Give us the address. It's at the...
It's right behind the Towson courthouse on Washington Avenue, which is between Allegheny and Pennsylvania. We have permits to do all those.
On the sidewalks.
But that back part, there's an open sidewalk that's larger than normal, and it's behind the garden. And
So the courthouse in Towson tomorrow night from 5 to 7. And bring your own candles, signs if you want. But we need to remember this fallen patriot. And like at Lexington and Concord, when blood was drawn by the tyrant, the people responded. And we need to respond by remembering and basically protesting, telling our elected officials this is not what America should be.
And just to mention, in case people don't know, it is a nationwide effort.
Yes, every state.
Every state. We're only up to 30, but at least we can do it.
Yes, so join us if you can tomorrow night from 5 to 7. Well, the issue before us tonight is a hot issue in our culture today because many people hear that phrase, natural-born citizen, and they have an immediate interpretation of it in their own mind, what they think it is. And then they hear all kinds of pundits and commentators say what they believe it is, and they even hear law professors and other lawyerly types saying, oh, this is what it means, or that's what it means. And so there's a great deal of confusion in America today. What we need to ask is, what did the founders mean? Whenever we address any question in our Constitution, it's not what some court says today or what some law professor says. It is what the founders said that phrase means. So what we're going to do tonight is explore what the founders meant and why it was important that this be a qualification of the person who's going to be president. And so we'll hear Herb Titus. We'll take a break at about the hour point. We'll take a break. We'll come back from the break, and then I'm going to give an application of what you heard and some more specifics that were not part of his presentation that can help solidify in your minds that this indeed is what the founders, what he presents, is what the founders said is meant by that phrase, natural-born citizen. Where they got the phrase from, what the phrase meant in print, how do we know that what was in print is what they were adhering to, all of those details, and then we're going to apply it to several candidates today. And I'm sure you may have some questions and discussion at that point, but that's where we're going tonight. So join me in welcoming Herb Titus, whose presentation we're going to watch at this point in time.
What a surprise to receive such an award, and it's especially touching because I served on the legal team defending Chief Justice Moore and have been a close friend and colleague with the Chief Justice for many years. He's one of the few judges that I know who actually have read the Constitution. And of course, as he also noted, he said, you're one of the few professors of constitutional law who's ever read the Constitution. And so we're going to be sure tonight to read the Constitution, because the answer to the question of what a natural-born citizen is, which is one of the requirements for someone to hold the office of President of the United States, is a matter of understanding and reading the Constitution. And so I'm going to concentrate not on what the Supreme Court has said, which they did rule back in the 19th century what a natural-born citizen was, according to their reading of the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. We're going to actually look at the Constitution as a whole, because in order to understand what a natural-born citizen is, one has to first understand how one becomes a citizen of the United States. As you know, in America, each of us who resides within the geographic boundaries of the United States holds a dual citizenship. Those of you who reside in Maryland and who are United States citizens are also citizens of Maryland, and this was true from the very beginning of this country, that people held citizenship in both the United States as well as in the state, and we're going to be talking about that. But first of all, why are we talking about this topic? Why is this an important subject? Well, we know it's an important subject because it came up in this last presidential election, not just with the person who currently occupies the White House, but his major opponent, John McCain. The question was raised whether John McCain was a natural-born citizen because he had been born in the Panama Canal Zone while his father was stationed as a Navy officer in that area. And for a while there was a flurry of concern whether or not John McCain was a natural-born citizen, having been born outside of the geographic boundaries of the United States. At about the same time, and much more recently after Mr. Obama was elected president, issues concerning Mr. Obama's citizenship have arisen. And we have been assured by the Obama supporters that he is a citizen of a natural-born citizen because he has a certificate of birth that he was born in Hawaii. And yet there's controversy over whether or not that certificate that has been posted on the internet and is available to you is really a certificate that he was born in Hawaii, or whether it was a certificate of birth that was issued by the state of Hawaii and he might have been born someplace else. Now, you would think that the president would be concerned about clearing that up. After all, if he was really born in the state of Hawaii, and if your birth in a state of the United States qualifies you as a natural-born citizen, why wouldn't you want to clear it up? Even Camille Paglia, a strong Obama supporter, expressed dismay that the Obama supporters had not cleared up this matter. As a matter of fact, she said she thought she was being gamed or played on this particular matter because the Obama forces would not address this question. In contrast, however, the Obama team immediately addressed the question that arose at the inauguration, where, as you know, if you saw the inaugural oath, the Chief Justice got faithfully in the wrong place. Now, since we're talking about the Constitution, let's read it, because it seems to be very important for the Obama people that the oath was exactly stated as it's written in the Constitution. It says, "I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will be, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, what happened was Chief Justice Roberts put faithfully after the United States. In other words, instead of saying that I will faithfully execute the office of president, Chief Justice Roberts said, I will execute the office of President of the United States faithfully. They were so concerned that they had not followed the Constitution to the letter that President Obama actually swore the oath a second time, and this time got it precisely right. Well, may I suggest to you that this is straining out an unconstitutional gnat so that the American people would swallow an unconstitutional camel. You would think that if he's that concerned about getting the oath exactly the way it's written in the Constitution, that he would be equally concerned that he could assure the American people that he was a natural-born citizen, as it states in Article 2, Section 1, that no person except a natural-born citizen shall be eligible to the office of the President of the United States. How do we answer this question with regard to natural-born citizens? Well, the first thing that's interesting about this particular provision of the Constitution is it says no person except a natural-born citizen of the United States. Notice it assumes that there's such a thing as a citizen of the United States. Now think about that for a minute. This appears in a document that is dated 1787. Well, it tells us something about the Constitution, doesn't it? It tells us right away that there was a United States citizenship that pre-existed the document. As a matter of fact, if you look at Article 1 and look at the qualifications for being elected to the House of Representatives, you had to be 7 years a citizen of the United States in order to be eligible to be elected to the House of Representatives. Now think about it for a minute. If the Constitution created the United States of America, nobody would have been eligible to be elected to the House of Representatives. The Senate, you had to be 9 years a citizen of the United States, and nobody would have been qualified to be a senator if there wasn't a citizenship, a United States citizenship, that came before the Constitution was written and adopted. And indeed, if you go back to the President of the United States, of course, at that time, the first president could have been elected president without being a natural-born citizen, because there was a provision that said, or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution. So every legislative officer and the President of the United States had first to be a citizen of the United States, or they would not have been eligible. As a matter of fact, not only does the President have to be a natural-born citizen or a citizen at the time, a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, he also has to be 14 years a resident within the United States. Now notice, in these provisions that relate to or refer to United States citizenship, it presupposes the existence of the United States of America prior to the Constitution of the United States. Well, if you go to the subscription clause, you will find why our founders believed that the United States was in existence before the Constitution was written. And it's found in the subscription clause. Now, I trust those of you who have a Constitution in your home library, that you have a Constitution that has the subscription clause. you will find that there are many publications of the Constitution that omits the subscription clause. Why is it important that the subscription clause be there? Well, it's the signature page. For example, if you have a contract to purchase a particular home or a particular item of personal property, if you leave off the signature page, it's not much of a contract, is it? Likewise, it's not much of a constitution if it leaves off the subscription clause. And what does it say? Done in convention by the unanimous consent of the states present, the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1787, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 12th. Now, if you count back, you find that the United States that it's being referred to is the United States that was created by the Declaration of Independence. Now, most people will tell you today, if you study the Declaration of Independence at all in college or in high schools, people will basically say that the Declaration of Independence was a piece of war propaganda. It was just a political statement. It didn't really have any significance legally. But as a matter of fact, it's the legal charter of the nation. It's the charter, it's the evidence upon which we can claim that we are entitled to exist in the family of nations as a nation. Indeed, the first paragraph is devoted to that point, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Notice, it's their claim that they have a legal right to be recognized as a nation in the family of nations, that they are no longer a part of the British nation or the British Commonwealth of Nations, but they are a nation independent of the the mother country. Now, this certainly answers the question of why it is that you had to be a citizen of the United States for 7 years before you could be elected to the House, or 9 years to be elected to the Senate. But what about that residence in America, 14 years? George Washington, in order to have been eligible to be elected the first president of the United States, not only had to be either a natural-born citizen or a citizen at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, but a resident in the United States for 14 years. That takes you back before the Declaration of Independence. As a matter of fact, it takes you back to 1774 and the Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress. And if you read that Declaration and Resolves, you will see that in that declaration, unlike the Stamp Act Congress that took place a decade before, you will see that they rested their claim on the laws of nature and of nature's God. So they believed that the United States came into existence in some ways now for then, nunc pro tunc, because de facto they were the United States even before the Declaration of Independence formally established them in the family of nations as an independent nation. Now, why is all of this important? Well, it's important because many people will skip over this part of the Constitution and go directly to the 14th Amendment and tell you that the 14th Amendment is what defines a natural-born citizen. Now think about that for a minute. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. The original Constitution was written in 1787. The 14th Amendment was not the first time that there was a natural-born American citizen. The 14th Amendment came almost a century after the birth of the Constitution itself. Now, that indicates then that United States citizenship pre-existed the 14th Amendment. Now, why is this important? Because you don't go to the 14th Amendment first to find out what is a natural-born citizen. You have to go back and look at the original text and realize that before the 14th Amendment was ever written, there was such a thing as a natural-born United States citizen. Now, let's go back and look at a couple of things with regard to that. You cannot find any definition of natural-born citizen in the document, can you? It doesn't say a natural-born citizen is such and such. Well, that's not unusual. For example, it says the legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. It doesn't define legislative powers. It says executive power shall be vested in the president. It doesn't define executive power. Indeed, if you go to the First Amendment and it says that Congress shall make no law with respect to an establishment of religion, it doesn't define what religion means. There are many words in the Constitution of the United States, as well as in the Declaration of Independence, that are not defined. Why? Because people knew what they meant, and they were using familiar language to capture what people already knew. A natural-born citizen is. That's why they put the words in the Constitution. They knew what the freedom of speech was. That's why they wrote the words in the Constitution. They knew what freedom of the press was. You see, they understood that law was not something that man made up, but rather it was something given to men by God. Now let's look at the evidence that we have to indicate that our founders understood that law was given to us by the Creator of heaven and earth. Remember that first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We so often forget to read it because we concentrate so much on the beautiful and wonderful language. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But we should not neglect the first paragraph, which is the foundation upon which everything else in the Declaration follows. And we've already seen how important the Declaration is in terms of understanding the nature of United States citizenship as something that existed prior to the Constitution itself. Now notice they laid their case for establishing the United States as an independent nation in the family of nations on the laws of nature and of nature's God. They didn't say the international law as the court at The Hague has told us. They didn't cite the United Nations Charter. They said the laws of nature and of nature's God. And remember, this document was written before Darwin wrote Origin of the Species. So don't think that we're talking about the survival of the fittest when it talks about the law of nature. As a matter of fact, at the time the Declaration was written, ordinary people, not just legal scholars, not just political statesmen, but ordinary people knew that the laws of nature was God's will revealed in nature. God's will revealed in nature. Now notice they didn't use the word natural law, because as Blackstone states it, natural law is only man's best understanding of the law of nature. It's only man's best understanding of what God has willed in nature. Now notice it's not just the law of nature's God, but the law of nature, it's also the law of nature's God. Now who is that but the uncreated creator to whom we are introduced in Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God. And is talking about the Holy Scriptures. So we are a nation that is founded upon God's will revealed in nature and God's will revealed in the Holy Scriptures. Now, if we're going to find out what a natural-born citizen is, then, thank you very much. If we're going to find out what a natural-born citizen is, we'd better find out what God has revealed in nature and in the Holy Scriptures. Now, before we do that, let me just make a couple of observations. First of all, whether someone is a natural-born citizen or not is important only with respect to one office, the office of the president. You don't have to be a natural-born citizen to be a member of the House of Representatives. You don't have to be a natural-born citizen to be a member of the United States Senate. You want to know something? You don't have to be a natural-born citizen to be Chief Justice of the United States. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to be a citizen. There's nothing in the Constitution which requires a justice or a federal judge even to be a citizen. And indeed, if you look at the statutes don't even require that. As a matter of fact, all of you know, I'm sure, that the Chief Justice doesn't even have to be a lawyer. This is quite an amazing thing when you start thinking about it, because we have been taught that the chief constitutional officers of the United States are 9 justices. After all, they have the final say as to what the Constitution means, don't they? Now, let's go back and ask ourselves a question. Why would it be important for the President of the United States, of all the officers in any branch of the government, to be a natural-born citizen? Well, I believe the answer is found in the Constitution. Do you know that there's only one officer whose oath of office is found written in the Constitution? We know who that is because we've already looked at it, haven't we? The President of the United States. That's the only oath of office spelled out in the Constitution itself. In Article 6, it says all the officers in the legislative branch as well as in the judicial branch are bound by the Constitution, but it doesn't set forth the oath that those officers must take. Only the president. Then let's look at one other thing that's important here in understanding why it is that the president, not the Chief Justice, not the Speaker of the House, not the President pro tem of the Senate, that the president and only the president has to be a natural-born citizen. The oath of office says that the president will, to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, if you go over to Article 6, where all those other officers are required to obey the Constitution, it says this: the senators and representatives, this is in the 3rd paragraph of Article 6, before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. Now, I dare say, I think there's a difference between defending, preserving, and protecting as contrasted to supporting. It's one thing to support the Constitution. It's another thing to defend it, preserve it, and protect it. Well, given the greatness of the trust and the ultimate efficient power in the presidency, you could see why our founders wanted to impress upon the president that he had a duty to defend, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Because he has the ultimate power that civil government has. He has the ultimate power to enforce by the symbol, of course, the sword, but to enforce, to force people to obey. Legislatures don't have that power. They have only the power to enact and to appropriate. And judges don't have that power. They only have the power to pronounce. The problem in America today is when the court pronounces, everybody runs as if they have to obey. When, as a matter of fact, the judge doesn't have any power to enforce his own order. He's completely dependent upon the executive department. And, of course, the executive power is entirely vested in the President of the United States. Now, from all of this, we can conclude that the most important constitutional officer of the United States of America is the President of the United States. If you have an unconstitutional president, you have an unconstitutional country. You can survive an unconstitutional legislature, you can survive an unconstitutional court, but if you have an unconstitutional president, and we've had an unconstitutional president for longer than we want to believe, because we haven't had a president who has taken the position that he is the ultimate decider whether or not the Constitution says what a court says it says. The president is responsible, for example, for enforcing the orders of courts in America that sanction the killing of babies. And he's not limited just in trying to get some judge on the court that would reverse Roe v. Wade. He is responsible for allowing court orders to be enforced by his United States Marshals instead of taking the position that when the court decides a case contrary to the Constitution, he will not enforce that court order. That is preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution of the United States. Now, when you think about that, why is it that the president then was to be a natural-born citizen? Joseph Story, one of the great early associate justices of the United States Supreme Court, in his commentaries on the Constitution, said because our founders understood that the greatest threat to a constitutional republic was by foreign influences in the executive department of government. That they had learned from history in Europe, where there had been intermarriages between families of different countries, how foreign influence could come in and destroy the independence and sovereignty of the nation. And they echoed this concern by placing in the Constitution of the United States that the President of the United States, and only the President of the United States, had to be a natural-born citizen, that is, a citizen completely immune from foreign influences such as had occurred in Europe. Indeed, St. George Tucker, one of the most forgotten constitutional statesmen of the early period of the country, said this, that foreign influence in the office of president is to be more dreaded than the plague. And of course, if you go back and look at the laws of nature and of nature's God, in that first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, notice it says, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle. You see, they understood that the nation order, the international structure of independent and sovereign nations, was a matter that was dictated by the laws of God. How do we know that? Because if you go back and look at Genesis, you will see that God condemned world government and requires that people associate civilly, nation by nation by nation, sovereign and independent nations by the law of nature and of nature's God. Let's look also very specifically at Deuteronomy chapter 17. In Deuteronomy 17, we see a most remarkable prophecy. Moses prophesied in this particular chapter of Deuteronomy that there would come a day when the people of Israel would reject God's government and desire a king like all the other nations. And indeed, in the days of Samuel, as recorded in 1 Samuel 8, that's precisely what happened. The elders came to Samuel one day complaining about Samuel's sons, and they said, we want a king like all the other nations. And indeed, even after Samuel warned them of what would happen if they had that kind of king, a totalitarian ruler, they still said, we want a king. But did God give them a totalitarian king? No, he did not. As prophesied in Deuteronomy 17, he gave the people of Israel a covenant king, a king bound by the law, not a king above the law, but a king bound by law. And remember, King Saul lost his kingdom, as recorded in 1 Samuel 13 and then in 1 Samuel 15, because he violated the law of God. He broke the covenant. In Deuteronomy 17:15, God said this, that you're not to have a king like all the other nations, but from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Ye shall not set a stranger over thee who is not thy brother. In other words, the king had to be a natural born citizen of the nation of Israel. So this principle of natural born citizen is one that comes straight from God's revelation in the Holy Scriptures. Now, let's go back and examine what we see to be the question in America today. Continues to be a question if you are on the internet. WorldNet Daily carries 3 or 4 or 5 articles consistently on this question. Is born in Hawaii enough? What if Mr. Obama was born in Hawaii? Well, let me just raise a couple of hypothetical questions. Well, suppose he was born in Hawaii to a Kenyan father and a Kenyan mother, and they just happened to be vacationing in Honolulu. Would that make him a natural-born citizen because he was born and let's assume Hawaii was a state? Or what if these two Kenyans were illegally in the United States of America and Barack Obama was born to them in the state of Hawaii? Would he be a natural born citizen? Well, we know this. At least we know this is what Mr. Obama claims. He was born to a Kenyan father and an American mother. Does that make him a natural born citizen? Well, today the assumption is that if you're born within the physical boundaries of the United States, that makes you a citizen. Indeed, a natural born citizen. Why? Why is it that the assumption is that if he had been born in Hawaii, it really doesn't matter to whom he was born, that is, who his parents were? Well, let's look at the 14th Amendment now, because we live in an age in which the 14th Amendment does define United States citizenship. Now, listen carefully. All persons born, and I'm leaving out our naturalized because we're talking about natural-born citizen, all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Now, notice, it doesn't say all persons born in the United States are citizens of the United States. No, it says all persons born in and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, if all you had to do was to be born in the United States, why would you put and subject to? It looks like there's two qualifications. You have to be born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction. Now, in 1898, the United States Supreme Court decided a case of Wong Kim Ark, who was born to two landed immigrants. They were not citizens. And the United States Supreme Court ruled that since he was born in the United States, then he was a citizen of the United States, by definition. Now, they didn't say he was a natural-born citizen, but they said he was a citizen of the United States. They said that what this particular provision in the 14th Amendment did was adopt the Old English common law. And the Old English common law was anybody who was born on the soil of England became a subject to the king. Chief Justice Fuller, in dissent, said this isn't England. This is America. And the old common law rule of England was based upon the assumption that the king owned everything. He was the proprietor of the nation, not just the executive officer of the nation. So anybody who was born on the soil belonged to him. Just like, if you were a serf and you were born and you belonged to your liege or your lord. And Chief Justice Fuller says that can't be what the 14th Amendment means. Why? Because the embodiment of the sovereignty of the nation is the people of the nation. That is, the people are the ones who have the authority to constitute and reconstitute a government. And here we go again, back to the Declaration of Independence. What does it say? When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for what? One people to dissolve. Notice, our nation was founded on the principle that the people have the authority to constitute and reconstitute the government. The sovereignty of the nation, the civil sovereignty of the nation, resides in the people. Now think about that for a minute if you go back and look at Scripture in 1 Samuel 8. Notice that even though God said that the people, when they wanted a king like all the other nations, were rejecting him, Did God say, I'm not going to let it happen? No. He allowed it to happen. In his mercy, thank God, he gave them a covenant king. But you see, God has given the people the authority to constitute the government. Now look at, again, the Declaration of Independence. Notice what it says. After it says that we are given, God-given rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that is, our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is given to us by God. Notice what it then says, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Notice, governments are constituted by the people. Rights are given to us by God. Any civil government that doesn't secure the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is violating the law of God, and the people are responsible for throwing off the tyrant. Now, how can you have a president be a natural-born citizen and perform his duty to defend, protect, and preserve the Constitution of the United States if he has divided loyalty because his father is a Kenyan and his mother is an American? That's like the old marriages in Europe. The Spanish princess was married to the French prince, and of course, for whose purpose? Oftentimes, for the purpose to undermine the independence and sovereignty of one nation or the other. Now, the immediate purpose of the 14th Amendment was to extend United States citizenship to the newly freed slave class. That was the problem. You see, if the newly freed slave class was to become citizens, it would be very difficult for them to qualify as a natural-born citizen because, in a sense, their parents were stateless. And so this provision of the Constitution was designed for the purpose of granting citizenship to the newly formed slave class. Now, they were comparable to a natural-born citizen. Why? Because the parents didn't have any idea what nation they came from. Oh, they knew they'd come from Africa, but Africa is a continent, not a nation. The important thing is to recognize that the 14th Amendment does not address the question of natural-born citizenship. The 14th Amendment may reflect what a natural-born citizen is. And indeed, you can find statements, and we make this available. By the way, this is a article written by Bill Olson, myself, and Alan Wall. We wrote this on the anchor baby question. And you will see on page 4 and through 6, and we have some copies with us in case any of you would like to pick up a copy. You will see statements made by senators and representatives back at the time of the 14th Amendment, which reflected that they thought the language subject to meant that you had to be born of parents who were allegiant to the country of the United States. Two parents, not just one, but both parents. And that's the record that you can find in the legislature that basically proposed the 14th Amendment. Now let me close by asking the final question that I think is important in discussing natural-born citizen. Who's to enforce this standard? In America today, the assumption is that if it's a constitutional question, the courts are where you must go. And indeed, there were a flurry of court cases in the United States, and there remain some in various places today in which there has been an attempt to adjudicate the question of whether Obama is a natural-born citizen. My own view is I believe the Constitution does not give the courts that authority, that this is not a question to be resolved by the courts. But rather, it's a question that belongs to an institution that hasn't functioned constitutionally for many decades. It belongs to the Electoral College. If you look at the Federalist Papers, and particularly one written by Alexander Hamilton, you will see that the purpose of the Electoral College was to mediate between people who got fooled by a demagogue and the Electoral College knew better than to elect that person to the office. After all, the people don't elect the President of the United States, the Electoral College does. And the Electoral College, as envisioned by our founders, was conceived to be a body of independent persons, men at that time, who would exercise their independent judgment and protect the nation from that kind of appeal to the masses. Listen to this language of Alexander Hamilton. He says, "Talents for low intrigue and the little arts of popularity may alone suffice to elevate a man to the first honors in a single state, but it will require other talents and a different kind of merit to establish him in the esteem and confidence of the whole Union, and of so considerable a portion of it as would be necessary to make him a successful candidate for the distinguished office of the President of the United States." Alexander Hamilton wrote those words in support of the Electoral College. Now, the significant thing about the Electoral College was that it was created for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to elect the president. It did not put the election of the president in Congress. It didn't put the election of the president in the courts. Why? Because they were concerned that the presidency would be compromised if pre-existing governing organizations dictated who would be the President of the United States. Again, reading from the Federalist paper, Alexander Hamilton said this. He said, "They have not made the appointment of the President to depend on any pre-existing bodies of men who might be tampered with beforehand to prostitute their votes." Now, what's happened in America today is the Electoral College is just a bunch of political hacks, mostly. That they're there for no other purpose than to rubber stamp the candidate of a particular college. At one time, when this controversy was pretty hot, before the Electoral College voted, I was in contact with a member of the Electoral College trying to encourage that person to write an open letter to the Electoral College colleagues, calling upon them to fulfill their constitutional obligation and to require that Obama prove whether he's a natural-born citizen. Unfortunately, it didn't get much further than a few consultations, but it just reminded me that we have become unwittingly in America today, captured by this notion that somehow, if it's a constitutional question, we have to have a judge decide it. That somehow judges are the only ones who know what the Constitution says. We ought to know better. We ought to know better because we know that they don't know. As a matter of fact, they pay no attention to what the Constitution says. They rather pay attention to what they say themselves. But ultimately, the issue is in the lap of the people, isn't it? If we're to expect the Electoral College to do its job, then really the people are the ones who ultimately are responsible with regard to the constitutionality of the actions, even of themselves. I believe that this is one of the major threats that we see in the American Republic today. We see it constantly in the statements about the New World Order. Of all times in American history, the independence and the sovereignty of America is at stake, and I believe that our forefathers understood that if the president was not a natural-born citizen, as defined by the laws of nature and of nature's God, without a divided loyalty, but a singular loyalty to the nation in which God has placed him, that it may very well continue this death spiral we are in terms of this constitutional republic. It's my prayer that this issue will not go away, and it appears not to be going away. I think one of you earlier today said that he had listened to President Obama make a statement that almost was a slip of the tongue in terms of his Kenyan ancestry. But we know that if the people aren't vigilant, God is vigilant. And I pray in God's grace and mercy that he will reveal to the American people how important it is that we not make this mistake again and not know whether a candidate for the President of the United States, the most important office in the land, is a natural-born citizen.
By the way, the article he referred to there that he held up, we do not have copies of that. But the quotes that he said were in that article are primarily in this DVD, weighing in on anchor babies, going back to the ratification debates about the 14th Amendment, what was said in the Senate, what was said in the House, what the meaning of those words, why they structured it the way they did. And I think you'll find, anyway, there's copies of this if you're interested in that. Let's take just a little more than 10-minute break. That clock back there says it's like 4 after. Let's go to a quarter after, and then we'll reconvene, and we'll do an application of what you have learned of the principles. We'll do an application to our situation today. So thank you much for your attention. Coffee break, food, books, DVDs, and we'll be back at quarter after. Thank you.
I'm singing the American view. I'm bringing the American view. There is a God, he gave us our rights. He gave us civil government too. I'm playing the American view. I'm praying the American view. Securing rights is what governments do in the genuine American view. God, our rights come from him. He is the author of the law. He created governments to secure those rights for us all. But when civil government gets all twisted, the people
I'm Steve Jackson. I've hosted the Institute on the Constitution here in Southern California for about 19 years. I'm currently tutoring some homeschoolers, and I'm trying to get across to the kids in the course of this year in U.S. history and Constitution two very important concepts. The most important things they can possibly learn. One relates to the Declaration of Independence, and it's the American view of law and government, which most of you know. There is a God, the God of the Bible. God is the source of law and rights, and the purpose of government is to protect our God-given rights. I want them to understand that. And I also want them to know about the Constitution, the doctrine of enumerated powers, which is summarized nicely in the 10th Amendment.
No! The only job is to secure your rights. So, the Declaration of Independence gave us that American view. You guys understand? But where does the Declaration of Independence get it from? Where do our rights come from? So where do we learn about God? So underneath the Constitution, we the people, the Declaration of Independence is what? Who wrote the Bible? God. And that Bible is a covenant. It is a contract, which is exactly what the Constitution is. We contracted with the government. We have what's called the Constitution. God contracted with His Son. Who is God's Son? To give us the Bible, the New Testament, the New Covenant. He sacrificed His life to give us that so that we could have the right to life, liberty, and property. And He put government into the world to secure our life, liberty, and property.
What I was explaining to him is that taking this class has made me more bold about being willing to tell people about God and that I believe in Him, because I believe that this class reinforces our beliefs. And I think that people that don't believe in God, I have a friend that doesn't who's taken the class, and what I told him was the class is not trying to teach you religion or convert you to God. This is about the biblical worldview of our founding fathers. And you have to get your head around that, because to understand the Constitution, you have to understand the founders. And to understand the founders, you have to understand what their view was, and that they were Christians and did believe in God. And hopefully that will reinforce other people's belief and maybe even bring some people to God that wouldn't before.
And I thank you for coming, because you have really warmed our hearts and made it real to us that somebody is fighting for America. And I thank you again for that. God bless.
We did a fabulous job, and it's very inspiring, and we really appreciate it.
This was an outstanding presentation. It's a real quick presentation of what the IOTC course is about, but more importantly, it is the integration of our faith and our country, our national heritage, all in one. And I can't recommend it more highly than that.
We are on the right track. The church is empowered to know that we can look through a biblical lens and make decisions and elect officials that will do what is right, just, and blessed by people, and that our forefathers, not perfect, forgiven, but they sought to do the right thing for all people. And so I got, I guess, energized to be bold, courageous, and I'm going for it.
Okay, so what I got out of today was the fact that I have a job to raise these kids and raise them right, how God gave me, this is what I'm supposed to do. So now that I've been presented with this information, I've got to know, and I don't know exactly where I'm going to go, but I've got a job to do. That's what I got out of today.
No longer will I carry this weight.
It was really good, the whole biblical perspective on the Constitution and just the founding fathers and everything was really insightful.
It gave me a better insight on basically biblical worldviews on our laws and basically our nation, and it just really hit my heart, and it did make me want to change the next generation for my own children, because that's something that really worries me, and I just feel a lot easier about that now, and I'm going to try to change the world.
I loved what was talked about because it challenged me to really think about, do I really love people if I just worry about offending them and don't really go after them and pursue them to Christ. And the illustration with if someone was driving their car off a cliff, would you just pray and say, I don't want to offend them, so I'm just going to hope that they do the right thing and stop but that you would really go after them. And sometimes we think of the spiritual realm as a separate place, but really it's as real as the physical realm here, if not eternally. We're going to be in eternity for a while, so it's really important, more important than the physical. And that really called me to action in the future with my profession and everything that I'm going to do. To use my profession as ministry, I don't have to be a preacher to be in ministry, which is what God calls every one of us to do.
I thought it was great. I'm a superintendent of a Christian school, and our kids they really need to know this information. We try to do the best we can, but it was presented in such a way that kids can understand it, and that's what we really need to be able to apply to their lives, because we all stress biblical worldview and people, Jesus sacrificing his life for us, and also the veterans. It was just a great, outstanding program.
During your thing, I really liked the quotes that you put out, and it was really cool to see what they said and gave a lot to think about.
That's cool. What about you?
I really liked your presentation. It was very active, kept everyone engaged. It was very easy to pay attention to. I really liked how you brought up a lot of quotes and stuff. It was very interesting learning some facts about them, and you just made it really interesting.
That's cool.
Hi, I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Sue.
And we just finished graduating our third U.S. Constitution class.
Yahoo!
I know. We're excited about it. Everybody that's taken it's been excited about it. And even after the very first class that we took, the very first lecture, we were all so pumped up that we couldn't wait for the next week. And nobody got tired of doing homework. They all loved it, because they were learning something new about the truth of the founding of this nation.
And now we're going to be starting a jury nullification class, and we just had sign-ups. We had 24 people sign up just tonight.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. I'm an attorney, and I'm excited to learn about that.
And one other thing, we have one of the students from our class is now going to be one of the facilitators, and she already has a whole class signed up.
Of at least 12 people.
Which
so
is
it's awesome.
I know.
So it's branching out, and we love to see that. We hope that you will do the same thing.
Yes.
I am so excited about graduating from this Constitution class. As a matter of fact, I'm so excited, and I got excited even after the first couple of weeks, that I went around gathering up people that would be interested in taking this Constitution class as well, and I am going to facilitate it. I actually made that commitment when I first started, after 2 or 3 weeks, and I thought, okay, I got to put my money where my mouth is, and I decided to do this.
It says it's on. There we go. Okay. But Teresa's going to be gathering it. Though, if you want to, in other words, if you want to ask a question when we're done with this presentation, go back, see Teresa, and she's going to send folks forward so that we don't have a bunching up here, and that way those who are watching online can get a clearer picture. But let me walk through this presentation here. Are we ready to put that up on screen? Can we do that? And I just want to make application of what we've learned, but also answer the question, there it is, that's still probably lingering in many people's mind. Is there any proof anywhere that the founders meant by that phrase, natural-born citizen, that both parents have to be citizens? I want to answer that question definitively. Now, there really are 3 distinct paths of citizenship, considering it from the angle of the baby's birth. At the moment of the baby's birth, that's the significant thing we need to remember. First situation is that neither parent is a citizen. And if neither parent is a citizen, we're going to look at the consequences of that. The second situation is that one parent is a citizen, the other is not a citizen, and the third situation where both parents are citizens. These are three distinct scenarios, and we need to understand what the Constitution says and how it applies. So in the first, if one parent or neither parent is a citizen, it is very clear that even if this child is born on the U.S. soil, and again, more detail is dealt with than we have time to go through in the Anchor Baby DVD, proving that this is the case, that even if the child is born on U.S. soil, they are not a citizen by birth. That is, Anchor Baby is not alleged to be under our U.S. Constitution as it originally was, or even the 14th Amendment. And we, again, deal with that in the Anchor Baby DVD. They can become citizens, of course. The process by which they become citizens is naturalization. So if they become a naturalized citizen, obviously they're not a natural-born citizen. Second scenario, one parent is a citizen at the moment of birth for the child, but the other parent is not. The baby is a citizen by birth, but not a natural-born citizen. Again, I want to show this distinction and why that is the case. Therefore, if one parent is a citizen and the other is not, they could not become the president, as Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 clearly states. Third situation, both parents are citizens at the moment of the child's birth. Doesn't matter how they became citizens. They could have been naturalized 2 days before and taken their oath of citizenship 2 days before the birth. But if they're both citizens at the moment of birth, the baby is a natural-born citizen by birth and therefore eligible to be the president of the United States. Now, what if this baby is born outside the country? Because there was a debate with McCain about this. Well, the research that I've conducted, if you are born on foreign soil, the parents need to file the conciliar report of birth abroad of a citizen of the United States of America to affirm that that child born abroad is a citizen of the United States. So, first principle we need to remember is this, that anchor babies are not citizens at all. Anchor babies do not have any citizenship. They can become citizens, but they must go through the naturalization process. Let me show you that consular report of birth abroad, because this, in terms of one candidate, will be a significant element in whether they are a citizen or not. This one was in 2005, and it's the United States Department of State that issues this consular report of birth abroad. And they have to go to the consulate in whatever country they are in. In this case, it looks like it was England, and there in England at the American consulate, fill out this form, have it approved, have it stamped and sealed by the consular there, and this consular report is proof that the baby born is a citizen of the United States. So a baby can be born outside the soil of the United States and be a citizen at the point of their birth, but this is an important document that does that. Now, the reason this is all a big question today, I'm quoting J.B. Williams here, I think he's correct in saying, Obama's massive destruction of our constitutional republic has placed the issue of constitutional eligibility on the front burner for many Americans, and partisanship has nothing to do with it. Now, what I'm going to share with you tonight may upset some good patriots and may make them mad at me. I am not talking about any of the issues of any of the candidates whatsoever. Not saying they're good on this or bad on that. I'm making no comment about their positions on any issue. I am just looking at the Constitution and their birth status regarding this issue of natural-born citizen, which our U.S. Constitution says, as Herb Titus has already shown us, no person except a natural-born citizen shall be eligible to the office of the president. So the question is, where did the founders come up with this phrase? And what did that phrase mean to them, which is the most significant point, because what that phrase meant to them is exactly what the text of the Constitution means today. The only way it can be changed is if there is an amendment of that phrase to say it no longer means what it meant then. So we need to go back and ask, what did the founders mean by that phrase? Where did they get the phrase in the first place? Benjamin Franklin received 3 copies of Émeric Bataille's excellent book, The Law of Nations, from a friend, Charles Dumas, in France. And he wrote a thank you letter. And notice what he said in this thank you letter. And notice the date of this thank you letter. December 9th, 1775. He said to him, I am much obliged by the kind present you have made us of your edition of Vital. It came to us in good season. Notice what time frame this is. This is before the Declaration of Independence was signed. This is when Congress was meeting and moving towards independence. You know, Lexington and Concord had already happened back in April of this same year, 1775. Came to us in good season when the circumstances of a rising state make it necessary frequently to consult the law of nations. They were consulting this book as part of their deliberations. He went on to say, accordingly, that copy, which I kept, so he kept a copy for himself, after depositing one in our own public library, so he put one in the public library, and then sending the other to the College of Massachusetts Bay as you directed. And he says this about the copy: has been continually in the hands of the members of our Congress now sitting. Congress read this book. They all knew the contents of Emmerich Vattel's book, The Law of Nation. He goes on to say, who are much pleased with your notes and preface and have entertained a high and just esteem for their author. So this book, The Law of Nations, is where we get the phrase that our founders incorporated into our Constitution, 12 years later, obviously, but that phrase, natural-born citizen. Now, a copy of this book was later produced in 1916, The Law of Nations. Albert de Laprudelle wrote an introduction, and notice what he said in his introduction. He's just recording the history about this book, The Law of Nations. The fathers of independence were in accord with the ideas of Vattel. They found in Vattel all their maxims of political liberty, and from 1776 to 1783, the more the United States progressed, the greater became Vattel's influence. In 1780, his Law of Nations was a classic, a textbook in the universities. So not only was Congress studying this book, many of the universities used this as a textbook. He continues in a footnote on that same page. Another copy was presented by Franklin to the Library Company of Philadelphia. So he kept one for himself, sent one to Massachusetts Bay, put one in the public, or not public, it was a private subscription library there in Philadelphia. Among the records of its directors is the following minutes. So the librarians wrote this. October 10th, 1775, Monsieur Dumas, having presented the library with a very late edition of Vattel's Law of Nature and Nations, the board direct the secretary to return that gentleman their thanks. This copy undoubtedly was used by the members of the Second Continental Congress, the one that drafted the Declaration of Independence, which sat in Philadelphia by leading men who directed the policy of the United Colonies until the end of the war, and later by the men who sat in Convention of 1787 and drew up the Constitution of the United States, for the library was located in Carpenter's Hall, where the first Congress deliberated, and within a stone's throw of the Colonial State House of Pennsylvania, where the Second Congress met, and likewise near where the Constitution was framed. In other words, they had access, they read this book. In fact, one historian in A Century of Lawmaking for a New Constitution said this: Vattel's Law of Nations was thereafter pounced upon by the studious members of Congress, groping their way without the light of precedence. Vattel was the source of this phrase, natural-born citizens. And Vattel's work was continually in the hand of Congress, just summarizing what we've seen. Members of the Continental Congress pounced on Vattel's work. Our founders used the Republican principles in Vattel's work to justify our revolution against the monarchy. By 1780, Vattel's work was a classic taught in our universities, and our framers used it at the Federal Convention of 1787. Can you see now why they didn't need to define this phrase, natural-born citizen? Everybody who was educated in anything about law and government knew exactly what this meant, because they were all reading the same source. Now, the Law of Nations says, Vattel's book, in chapter 19, section 212, of the citizens and natives, the citizens are the members of the civil society bound to this society by certain duties and subject to its authority. They equally participate in its advantages. The natives, or natural-born citizens, there's the phrase, are those born in the country of parents, notice it's plural, parents, both parents, who are citizens. In other words, if one parent is not a citizen, it's not a natural-born citizen. Both parents have to be citizens. And it goes on to say, as the society cannot exist and perpetuate itself otherwise than by the children of the citizens, those children naturally follow the condition of their fathers. and succeed to all their rights. So if the fathers and the mother were not a citizen, well, then the child is not a citizen, and succeed to all their rights. If a person is born there of a foreigner, it will only be the place of his birth and not his country. They understood all the way back in reading Vital that anchor babies were illegal. Just because you were born in a place did not make you a citizen of that place. It was the condition of your parents and their citizenship that counted. In that same chapter, in section 213, inhabitants are contrasted with citizens. Inhabitants, as distinguished from citizens, are foreigners who are permitted to stay in the country. They are subject to the laws of the country while they reside in it, but they do not participate in all the rights of the citizens. In other words, they can't vote, and they shouldn't be voting, as they do in our state and other states. It goes on to say they enjoy only the advantages which the law or custom gives them. Their children follow the condition of their fathers. They too are inhabitants. So if someone's an inhabitant of the land, they have a child, that child's not a citizen, that child is an inhabitant. I think quite clearly Emmerich makes it crystal clear. And then in sections 215 in the same chapter, and 216 and 217, just summarizing, children born of citizens in a foreign country at sea or while overseas in the service of their country are citizens. By the law of nature alone, children follow the condition of their fathers. The place of their birth produces no change in this particular. So what happens if a child's born on the high seas, Or what happens if a child's born in an airplane crossing the ocean? Well, they're not born in any country. It doesn't matter the place of their birth. What matters is the condition of their parents and the citizenship of their parents. Just summarizing, these are some of the comments of Hulda. She said that the Republican concept of natural-born citizenship is radically different from the feudal notion of natural-born subjectship. And Herb Titus was talking about that. The king claimed if you were born on any of his soil, you became his subject. You became not a citizen, you became a subject of the king. Under feudalism, merely being born in the domains of the king made one by birth a natural-born subject, not a natural-born citizen. And by the way, that's really what people are claiming today. When you're born on the soil of America and you become a natural-born what? Not citizen, natural-born subject. They've adopted that feudal mindset that our founders rejected. We fought a war over that, didn't we? We're not subjects of the king. We're citizens. So Vital's model and our constitutional republic, citizens are natural-born only if they're born of citizens, both parents being citizens at the time of the child's birth. Now let's look at the application then in our Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 reads, no person except a natural-born citizen. I hope by now Vital has persuaded you, and the evidence that our founders all read him, and they were studied in what he said, that they meant by a natural-born citizen being a president, that he had to be, both parents had to be citizens at the time of the birth of that child. And so making application of this, let's take a look at one candidate. We'll take a look at two candidates and be willing to talk about any others, but just two candidates that come to mind here. Senator Cruz, I believe, has a citizenship problem, or had a citizenship problem, depending on how you want to look at it. Back in August of 2013, Dallas Morning News pointed out that Cruz had dual Canadian-American citizenship. I questioned part of this, but they claimed he had dual citizenship, and that motivated him as a Texas senator to formally renounce his Canadian citizenship, and he ceased being a citizen of Canada on May 14th, 2014. You know when he became a senator? 2012. So for 2 years, he's a senator, but he's a citizen of Canada. That seems to be a problem. Now, Senator Cruz's problem goes on. He was a legal citizen of Canada when he ran for and became U.S. Senator without having disclosed his Canadian citizenship to Texas voters, which seems to be a problem both with the law of Texas as well as the U.S. law, because our Constitution says, Article 1, Section 3, Clause 3, no person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years. He qualified there, and been 9 years a citizen of the United States. And goes on to say the rest of that. So he had to be a citizen for 9 years, okay? Well, let's think about his situation. The problem that Ted Cruz had is that he claimed dual citizenship, and our founders said dual loyalties, other than, as Herb Titus pointed out, you're a citizen of your state and a citizen of the United States. That's not a dual loyalty, that's loyalty to one and the same. But dual loyalties are a problem, and our founders did not want anyone with foreign citizenship claiming citizenship in the United States. Jesus, after all, said no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, Matthew chapter 6. So dual citizenship is a problem. Having retained his Canadian citizenship until 2014, means that he could have even voted in Canada during that period of time. He could have even run for the Canadian Parliament while at the same time he was in the U.S. Senate. Does that seem to be a problem? Yeah, I would think so, wouldn't you? Now notice our current law and our current oath of citizenship, that is, if somebody's going to naturalize and become a U.S. citizen, this is the oath that they currently have to take. And notice how clear it is prohibiting anyone from becoming a U.S. citizen if they are a dual, or they want to maintain dual citizenship. This is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Here's the oath. I hereby declare on oath, that is a solemn vow made before Almighty God, invoking his curses if we violate that oath. And it goes on to say that I absolutely and entirely renounce, now, and abjure. Well, let's just take those three phrases there. Is there any wiggle room available there? No wiggle room that I see. I can't see how anybody else could interpret that there's wiggle room. I entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance, and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or a citizen. Well, wait a minute. Wasn't he a citizen of Canada? Yes, he was a citizen of Canada. Goes on to say that I'll support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I'll bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law, and I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law, and I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by the law, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. So the person becoming a naturalized citizen is swearing before Almighty God and bringing God's curses on them if they violate that oath that they are swearing. Well, we saw it already, that you have to be a citizen for 9 years to be a senator. Now think with me for a minute. Does any of this sound familiar? You know, a man with known foreign origins, the son of a father who was not a citizen of the United States at the time of the birth of that child, a freshman senator who is a Harvard lawyer with Harvard law friends, and no, to our record at least at this point, no U.S. documentation to prove that he is a U.S. citizen of any type. And I'll show you a little bit about that in a moment. But it was 35 years after Ted's birth in Canada when his father renounced his Canadian citizenship. There's his dad there, and became a naturalized citizen of the United States in 2005. Raphael's known legal citizen status as of 1970, when Ted Cruz was born, was Cuban, not American, even though he was in Canada, and his wife, so it was Cuban. Here, by the way, as all this flap has erupted, Ted Cruz has put out 2 documents to show that he's a natural-born citizen. Here's the first one, certificate of birth. Notice the location, Department of Health of Edmonton, Canada. Place of birth, Calgary, Alberta. You can see the citizenship or the place of birth of his father in Cuba. His mother was born in Wilmington, Delaware, USA. So he said, yes, I was born in Canada, and thereby, by the laws of Canada, a citizen of Canada. And in 2014, then he showed us this, that he renounced his Canadian citizenship. It clearly says there, place of birth was Alberta, Canada, and this document is to certify that the person named above, Raphael Edward Cruz, certify this person named above is formally renouncing Canadian citizenship and in pursuit to the Citizenship Act will cease to be a citizen on May 14th, 2014 is the exact date. And by the way, it's in French because in Canada everything's done in English and French. We're moving that way with Spanish, but that's another story. Now, you could say, but wait a minute, Ted's mother was a citizen, American citizen, right? She tried to be a dual citizen, at least for a point in time. And Ted's mother would have to, in order to retain his exclusive U.S. citizenship, file that CRBA that I showed you earlier, Consular Report of Birth Abroad, with the U.S. Department of State and Immigration and Naturalization Service to obtain exclusive U.S. citizenship at the time her son Ted was born. And she would have, in the same way, been renouncing what was automatically acquired or naturally acquired, his Canadian citizenship. The record for this does not exist. As far as we know, and nothing has been revealed that document, the CRBA, was ever filed in December of 1970. So it would appear, and I'm going to explain this in a moment, that he is not even a naturalized U.S. citizen. Canada, by the way, did not allow, at that point in time, did not allow dual citizenship. So if they said you're a Canadian citizenship, they were saying you're not a citizen of any other country. You're only a Canadian citizen at 1970. And he was a natural Canadian citizen until 2014. No known records of it ever taking time to declare naturalized U.S. citizenship when he turned 18, which is required in U.S. law. If you're claiming that you are a U.S. citizen at 18, you have to make that declaration if you were born out of the country. And there's no authenticated evidence that Ted Cruz is a citizen of the U.S., let alone a natural-born citizen. So this huge debate is taking place, and the question is, what took place? His parents did not file the form when he was born, and the only thing that he has released is proof of his Canadian citizenship and then the renunciation of his Canadian citizenship. And so some citizens have filed Freedom of Information Act requesting a search of any U.S. citizenship documents to confirm the true and official U.S. citizenship status of Ted Cruz. They have been denied access to any such records, if any such records exist. All citizenship records for Ted Cruz are sealed unless and until Ted Cruz agrees to allow any such records to be released, either by the U.S. or Canadian agencies. We don't know what we can't see. All he's revealed to us is those two documents that would indicate he would not be qualified to be president because he is not a natural-born citizen. Both parents were not citizens at the moment of his birth, and even his mother didn't go through the process to be certain that he become a U.S. citizen, though not natural-born, the paperwork filed and make that take place. What he is, I don't know. He's renounced his Canadian citizenship. Nothing is revealed about, did he naturalize then to the United States? Don't know. Let's look at another candidate, Marco Rubio. Born in 1971, just a year later, in Miami, Florida, to Mario Rubio, a Cuban citizen, and Oria Garcia, also a Cuban citizen. Both parents were Cuban citizens when Marco Rubio immigrated to the United States. And that's in 1956, and they waited 19 years to become U.S. citizens, 4 years after Marco's birth. He was born, and they became citizens, but citizens 4 years later. So it's interesting. I agree with Herb Titus. Really, the courts are not the ones that decide this, but there is a court case in Florida against Cruz and Rubio. Legal experts and politicians continue to question and so forth, and the court has been asked to decide, and Rubio has asked the Florida court to dismiss the complaint, arguing that the Florida senator is not a natural-born citizen, and Rubio says, this would upset all these years of precedent, and we'd be questioning whether certain presidents were really legally president. Maybe he's thinking of the guy in the White House right now, I don't know, but he hasn't named who he thinks on his list of 6 presidents that would be challenged if we were to undo this, and he says, we've all been doing it this way, doesn't matter, let's just continue doing it the way we have done it. Both parents were obviously not citizens at the moment of his birth. And therefore, you might say, I think they were here legally. I couldn't find that out, but it appears that they were here legally, which means their baby was an anchor baby. He could become citizen, but he would only become a citizen by being naturalized, as the parents were not citizens at the moment of his birth. So just a quick reminder here that the 3 distinct paths to citizenship, the first being that neither parents are citizens at the moment of the birth. Child born on the U.S. soil really doesn't make a difference. Not a citizen by birth, could become a citizen by naturalization, clearly. Situation where one parent is a citizen, the baby is citizen by birth, but not a natural-born citizen because both parents are not citizens. He could not, therefore, become president. And by the way, that citizen by birth, if it's born out of the country, as with Cruz's mother, she should have filed the paperwork to establish his citizenship. And then both parents citizens, the baby is a natural born citizen by birth and therefore eligible to be president. Again, if they were born out of the country, it would be very important for those two parents to be certain the paperwork was filled out affirming that their child was a U.S. citizen from the moment of birth and therefore a natural born citizen. At this time, I think we'll open it up for questions. Teresa's back there, so go ahead and see. Teresa, you're going to send people forward, I think? Okay. Okay. And then she'll send them forward one at a time. That way we can, and I guess we have some online questions as well. Okay, go ahead up to the microphone here so those online can hear us.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify your point of, with respect to Cruz, that even if his mother would have filed the paper, he still isn't eligible because his
Correct.
father was not a citizen.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He could have been a citizen if she had filed the paperwork, but not a
that's all.
natural born citizen.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you.
Good question. Who's next? Thank you, Natalie, for taking the online questions.
This one is from Stephen Jackson, and it says, should Pastor Whitney comment on Vattel's use of father more than once after his Section 212 definition of natural-born citizen?
Yes, and he does say fathers, plural, Vattel does. And so I'm taking that to mean he's talking about parents, those who fathered the child. Both parents he's referring to. Now, I know that that's possible to interpret otherwise and say the child then always follows the direction of their parent or their father and not their mother in terms of citizenship. But if both are citizens of the same country, I think Vattel clearly is saying that therefore that child is a citizen of the country of both of the parents. If the parents are split, one of one country and one of the other, then you got a little bit of a debate. Well, wait a minute, does the child then go with the father? In which case, you know, not Rubio, but Cruz would be with a Cuban father, and likewise with Obama, then would be with a Kenyan father, which is interesting. At the time of his birth, his Kenyan father was actually a subject of Great Britain, which Great Britain claims if you're born on the soil, you become subject of that. So, you know, if he went with his father, his citizenship would be British and not even Kenyan. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Next.
Yes.
Thank you, Adrian.
It's my understanding today that according to the United Nations and international law, when there is a subject of children born of parents of two different nationalities, the United Nations and the international courts recognize the nationality of the father as the legal and lawful nationality of the individual. Does that weigh into this in any kind of way?
I don't know that, but that could be true. I don't know whether the UN does that or not.
Okay.
But I don't believe it weighs into this because it's what our founders established and what they meant by the phrases in our Constitution that's of significance for our decisions.
I only ask because
Vattel,
specifically beyond parents, he named
fathers.
Yes. Fathers.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, is that the source for the United Nations? Because it is consistent.
It is
with what is being said.
And what we find is that our founders didn't address that question in the mix of issues that they were dealing with. They didn't address, okay, if a child's born and the citizenship of the father is what they follow. They really didn't address that question, but Vattel seems to or implies that it might be the child follows the father's citizenship status.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question. Yes. Thank you, Natalie.
This is from Claudia Taylor, and she says, because this has gone on for so long, what is your best assessment of what will happen?
Well, the big problem, I think, Claudia, thank you, that's an excellent question. The big problem is that the American people, by and large, don't respect the document anymore and think it means whatever the courts say it means rather than what our founders said it means. So educating millions of Americans is really our task, to wake them up to the fact that it is not as we are being told. I don't know what the court in Florida is going to rule, but other law professors and some law journal has issued a statement saying, oh, of course, Rubio's a natural born. Oh, of course, Cruz is natural born. And they've just jettison the standard and further confuse the American people, because generally the American people look at, those in the legal profession and those judges say, well, they must know what it means. I don't know what it means. And they're not going to trust any other source. Well, they ought to do what we're doing, go back to the founders and say, what did the founders say it meant? And then work from there. So we need to educate millions of Americans, because at this point in time, it appears that in at least the GOP race, I haven't studied each situation in the Democrat race, but in the GOP race, it's clear that there's two who are in the front running that are not natural-born citizens.
Yeah, it's kind of disheartening.
It is.
Yeah, because who wants Trump?
We've got go ahead back so she can kind of, go ahead back. Al, thank you.
I think what we have here is failure to communicate. I know the people in the legal profession like to throw around phrases like the original intent of the law, the spirit of the law, the letter of the law, and what was the other one? Unintended consequences. I think we're experiencing all of that here with this natural citizen business.
Yes, yeah, thank you, because the confusion is that many Americans think, and this is the sad thing, many Americans think it doesn't matter. Where our founders thought, as Herb Titus established, it matters a great deal, because the loyalty of a person, if, say, somebody from communist China, or let's say communist Russia during the Cold War, Kenya, but let's take a communist country. You're at war with this communist country, and the child born has a communist USSR father and an American mother. Which one is he going to be loyal to? And Herb Titus kind of referred to this in terms of Europe. Europe was often in great turmoil, because what marriages usually accomplished for the kings was to build alliances. So King Henry VIII, he had a Spanish wife that created alliance between Spain and England. Well, who's the children of that union going to be loyal to, Spain or to England? And, it just mixes up the whole thing, and it means that the sovereignty of the nation is further diluted. And so when King Henry VIII decided to oust his wife, which I don't think was biblical, but nonetheless, he ousted his wife, and it was a huge flap, because now, basically, these two nations no longer had an agreement of peace, and there was hatred that led to war later on. But our founders knew we don't want that kind of scenario to develop in our country. We want to be sure a person is loyal to these United States, not a split loyalty to Kenya or to some other country. Come on up. If you go back there, go ahead back. Yeah, go back there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to raise a question, but it's got I brought this up before. I'm not prepared. I wasn't ready for this, but one of the members of Parliament, back when the uprisings in the colonies, he said the colonists have a particularly dangerous habit of reading law, and I know that more law books. The law books were all printed in England, but they were selling more to the colonies.
Yes.
Back to what you said, that everybody was familiar with Vattel, which nobody is familiar with Vattel today.
Yeah.
And then later on, after the ratification of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson said, without a literate population, a Constitution is moot, which feeds into today that there is a deliberate effort to dumb down and make the entire population illiterate. Removal of phonics from the schools, removal of handwriting from the schools. And it is my contention that this is a deliberate effort by those who seek to circumvent and make moot the Constitution, when we have a population, at least where I live in Baltimore City, majority illiterate or functional illiterate. And until that is addressed, you're not going to win this by voting when the average voter is illiterate and cannot possibly understand what they are voting for. And that is the question, and how is that going to be dealt with? Everybody wants to talk about the next election when you're being outvoted by illiterates. And so that has to be addressed.
And perhaps
So-
it could be addressed with the same type of ministry that began as the Sunday school ministry was actually not the children in church. We kind of think of Sunday school as, oh, that's for the kids who are already in church. In England, the Sunday school ministry was to reach the illiterate children in the populace who were often working in, sweatshops and that sort of thing. So on Sunday, they would gather them together, and the first thing they did is teach them to read so that they could read the Bible. So we need a revival of that kind of ministry to the illiterate Americans who don't know how to read and don't know even the basics of our Constitution, and therefore they just vote for whoever promises them the most goodies. Oh, you're going to get an Obama phone if you vote for him. So, yep, and that, you're right, is a huge problem. So we have a foundational issue that must be addressed as well. Appreciate that. Thank you, Adrian. Kevin, thank you.
I just thought of something ironic. The Republicans had 3 senators in the primary.
Mm-hmm.
The one who's naturally born citizen just dropped out. Something's wrong with that picture.
Yes.
So, but also, someone pointed out the other day that he suspended his campaign. So he's still on the ballot. So
Okay.
maybe if we get on this thing about Rubio and Cruz, get them to drop out, then he can get back in.
Mhm.
I'm not saying Rand Paul's perfect, but I think of those 3, of many other candidates, he's probably the most constitutional we've got.
Okay.
So
Great. Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Hey, hi guys. Hey, I had a statement, if I may, more than a question, and the reason it's timely that this came up is because I've been arguing about this subject, and I don't know a fraction of what you know. Obviously, I've learned a lot here tonight, but I've argued with a lot of people about this natural-born citizenship thing, and basically it gets down to someone saying, well, I don't believe that, and that's the end of the story. And a lot of the arguments that I've heard is that, well, do you have a law degree? I mean, and they bring up people like Mark Levin and people like this, like, I'm going to believe someone with a law degree who, worked for Reagan and all this stuff. But I guess I just wanted to encourage the people here tonight that even though we don't have law degrees, the Constitution seems to me is something that as citizens we're supposed to know. We don't need a law degree to be able to know these things. It was written so that we could know these things and that we could, basically be responsible for our own country. Just like you don't need to go to seminary to understand the Bible. I mean, it's the same concept, I guess I just want to encourage you to not be intimidated by people who say, you don't have a law degree, so who are you to tell me, And obviously it comes with education, but I guess I just wanted to bring that up because I think that kind of shuts down a lot of the, discussion, and just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you, Hillary, and that's exactly why Institute on the Constitution exists, to reconnect Americans with their founders and what their founders said and believed. So our intention is, as people learn what they learn in studying at Institute on the Constitution, they're going to share it with a circle that they will influence, and that's powerful.
And the Institute on the Constitution, like you said in one of the classes, teaches more about the Constitution than they're learning in law
Yes,
school.
more than they learn in law school, they'll learn at Institute on the Constitution. Amen. And by the way, in the break, many of you maybe didn't get a chance to see that, but one of the hosts of one of our courses in California is an attorney, and an attorney who's learned a great deal about the Constitution as a result of taking our course. Sue Ann.
It seems to me that the content of Vattel in the Law of Nations very much ends the argument. Just curious, has he been cited in any other Supreme Court argument of any subject thus far?
I'd have to look back. In the Anchor Babies DVD, I cite 2 cases. One case that Herb Titus referred to, the case of Wong, who was born of 2 parents that were neither citizens. And then the case Elk, that was about 10 years before that, was the case of an Indian who, born of 2 parents who were both Native American Indians, so he's born subject to the jurisdiction of the Indian nation. So if you're born a native of an Indian nation, you're subject to the jurisdiction of that nation because the citizenship of your parents is of that Indian nation, not of one of the United States. And they ruled, the Supreme Court in that case ruled correctly that John Elk, was not a natural-born citizen. He was not even a citizen. He had to be naturalized in order to become a citizen of the United States, even though he was born on the soil of the United States in one of the, in one of the 50 states. Well, it wasn't 50 states in the Union at that point in time, but he was born subject to both parents being citizens of his native country. So I'd have to go back and look at those two cases and see, do they cite Vitale as a source? But that would be a good research project to see, has the Supreme Court cited Vitale in any of those? I know they've cited other Supreme Court opinions, cite other Supreme Court opinions, kind of building on themselves rather than saying, what was it that the framers were looking to and the framers were relying upon when they crafted that phrase, rather than what somebody today says is the source of understanding that.
Sure is.
Great question. Thank you. Michael.
Hi there. My name is Michael Peruk. It's good to see you. Just
a natural-born citizen.
And I am a natural-born citizen of Maryland and these United States. Just before Sue Ann, Hillary spoke, and she talked about the fact that you don't need to be an attorney to understand these things or to comment upon them. As an attorney, I want to second her motion and actually add to it, if I could, by saying that Pastor Whitney, it is much better if you're not an attorney. It's much easier to understand these concepts if you don't have the curse of law school, because what happened in law school is we were taught that these principles that the founders held we were not taught to understand these. We were taught that courts make law, and we were taught away from these things. So these principles that we're talking about tonight are really principles of the common man. Right. And when the Federalist Papers were written to encourage people to adopt the Constitution, they were written to the farmers of New York State. They were written to the common people. They were written for the purpose of the common people to understand these principles and these concepts. Please, the purpose of my comment is just to say, please do not be, and this is again to second what Hillary said, do not be over-impressed or impressed at all, if you will, by what people who are papered or certified or have some kind of legal credentials. The law is easily understood, and as a matter of fact, the Constitution is easily understood by the common man, and that again is the purpose for instituting the Constitution. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Michael. One more question. I think we have time for one last question. Adrian. Oh, do we have another lined up? Okay, we'll do two questions. Yeah.
It is my understanding that at the time of ratification of the Constitution, the inhabitants were not citizens of the United States.
That's correct.
They were citizens of the state in which they resided, and the states were members of the Union called the United States.
Right.
And the original Constitution, United, was spelled with a small u.
Well, the original Declaration was.
Oh, the original
Constitution.
Declaration.
Yeah, they capitalized it in the Constitution.
They capitalized it.
But it was lowercase in the Declaration.
In the Declaration, okay. But ultimately, you were not a citizen of the United States. You were a citizen of the state in which you were born in, or the state in which you resided. And your rights actually came from the state who pledged its loyalty to the Union.
Or your rights were secured by the state.
And see, that's a distinction right now, because we are being told we are pledging our loyalty to the federal Union, when actually our rights come from, I'm supposing this, I'm not stating this, and we may have to get clarification on that from some people, but we are actually citizens of Maryland.
That's right.
And Maryland has pledged its loyalty to the United States.
Now, the change that happened is the 14th Amendment, which we could go into a long dissertation about the 14th Amendment and its ratification, quote unquote. But the 14th Amendment claimed to change that, claimed that the U.S. government, the federal government, was now going to declare to the states who their citizens were. Up to that point in time, every state would have had a different set of standards in terms of citizenship oath may not have been uniform among all of them. Immigration was uniform because, naturalization, was uniform, not immigration. Naturalization was determined by Congress, so how you became a citizen, but the standards for citizenship differed from state to state, and the states had the power over that. 14th Amendment claimed to change that, and you can see the results of changing that when the federal government tells you who your citizens are, ultimately the federal government under Reagan told us that there was 10 million, or I don't know, maybe more than that, of illegal aliens were now citizens, which meant the states had to treat them as if they were citizens. The states had no choice. Federal government, you're going to have these people whether you like it or not, and they are now your citizens. So that's the difference that the 14th Amendment made. If we say that it was legally ratified, that it changed the standard and no longer each state making that decision, but the federal government making the decision for the state. But that's still true. We're citizens of our state first. And then there's a loyalty to our state, and our state is the primary one that should be protecting our God-given rights. Good question. One last question then. Thank you, Don.
Hello, everyone. My name's Don Barker. I'm with Common Law Study. You can find us on Facebook. We teach civics and rights and all the things that our government schools want to deprive us of. This 14th Amendment, it's interesting that we're talking about this, and I've been doing some research on it recently. The Constitution starts out, we the people. It doesn't say we the citizens. It doesn't say we the persons. But this amendment wants to reduce us to citizenship. It starts out, all persons. You got to look at words. This is word magic we're dealing with. This is hocus pocus. This is a lot of deceit. Right there, we're not all people, but all persons. Persons is nothing more than a mask, an actor. It's something superficial. It's not a human being. It's not a real living, real man, real human being, not a member of mankind. Right there, you're converted to something other than a human being. Born or naturalized in the United States, not the United States of America. The United States, that's a corporation. And subject. Now, if you don't know that you're a people, which is both plural, it's plural and singular, and you want to be subject, well, slaves, people who voluntarily become slaves, or slaves themselves, are subject, as you were stating earlier, to the king, and then to the jurisdiction thereof. This amendment was allegedly to free people. In my humble opinion, it didn't free anybody. It took all people, all slaves, and converted people from being involuntary slaves to voluntary slaves without knowing it, without having any idea. So this thing, it's like a lot of law. It's pretty nasty. You gotta understand legalese. There's 3 languages being spoken here: English, slang, and legalese. Legalese gets very nasty. Quick quote: Cornwallis, during the signing of the Article of Capitulation with Washington, was quoted in a book by Jonathan Williams written in 1781 called The Legions of Satan. Cornwallis revealed to Washington that during that surrender, now a holy war will now begin on America, which is supposed to be a citadel of freedom, but unknowingly be subject to the crown. In less than 200 years, we will be working for a divine world government.
Very interesting.
Yeah. That government believed to be divine will actually be the British crown. Read the Treaty of Paris. Look at its wording. Basically, the crown in that document says we were petulant, misbehaved little kids. We were their children. Nothing had ever changed. They went right back to owning us. But they did it, from what I can tell, in a sense of we volunteer for this. We're voluntarily enslaved, and they still own us and run us. I don't have time. I don't want to take it up. But the 14th Amendment, from what I can tell, converted everybody into persons, into something other than people. It didn't free anyone. It enslaved everyone, and we volunteer for this. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. Let's stand and close in prayer, okay? And again, thank you for your kind attention tonight, and thank you for caring about our constitutional republic. Let's pray. God our Father, we thank you that your law is perfect, just, and holy. It is infallible, without error in everything it states. We confess that human law, even when it's done very well, does contain errors, does contain flaws. But we know that our founders, much wiser than those who are our leaders today, designed a system of government that was aimed at securing our God-given rights. Father, I pray for each person, both those in the room and those viewing online and those viewing it later, that you would use them to share the truth that they have learned in their circle of influence, that we might turn back from what we have become and restore the constitutional republic of these United States. We pray these things in Jesus' blessed name. Amen. 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 Thank you all.
Was not so new back in 1773. It has roots that run back to Genesis 1 and all through history. So give me your ear if you care to hear the plan for liberty. It covers the span since time began, and it's true for you and me. A tyrannical king is a terrible thing our fathers had to face. But they declared with the faith they shared, law comes from a higher place. I'm singing the American view. I'm bringing the American view. There is a God, he gave us our rights. He gave us civil government too. I'm playing the American view. I'm praying the American view. Securing rights is what governments do in the genuine American view. There is a God, our rights come from him. He is the author of the law. Created governments to secure those rights for us all. But when civil government gets all twisted and bent, the people have a duty to do. Abolish it and then rebuild it again in a way that is righteous and true. But how do we know what is righteous and true? Where is the beginning and the end? Is there a standard tried and true on which to depend? I'm singing the American